Hello and welcome to Dinis Guarda YouTube podcast show, powered by citiesabc.com, fashionabc.com, and wisdomia.ai, businessabc.org, and sportsabc.org. We're excited to continue looking at solutions, empowering and profiling the most inspiring personalities in the world when it comes to business, technology, and as well about the way we can actually create a better world with our emotional empowerments, and as well with the balance between IQ and EQ, and how we can actually put all of this together. It's not easy because the world of technology and business is a continuous challenge, and from the 20th century to 21st, we have more challenge and there's more disruption than ever in history of humanity. But that's why we need to have a balance with ourselves. And today I'm particularly excited to welcome someone that has been kind of teaching me and inspiring me on that direction of making a balance between our IQ and EQ, and we'll explain these terms during the conversation. And I welcome to our series Deborah Sawaf. So Deborah is a Bombay-born designer, trained in Los Angeles with Italian influences, and a global recognized advocate for women and a changemaker in fashion industry, and as well increasingly becoming a powerhouse in the ideas and the technology, and as well how we balance emotional intelligence into business, into education, into different areas. She's the founder and CEO of Thalé Blanc, a luxury premium brand established in 2010 that specializes in women's designer handbags, clothing, accessories, and jewellery. Deborah Sawaf's initiative, The Power of Words, a purpose-driven fashion brand and art collection dedicated to breaking mental health stigma, created a lot of new solutions in terms of approaching emotional intelligence and as well fashion and design and creativity. Launched in 2022, this initiative integrates fashion, pop culture, music, and art and film to raise awareness and support for mental health through collaborations with mental health apps, NFT platforms, and public events. The brand's efforts have been recognized by the Camara Nazionale, della Moda Italiana, and the United Nations as the first socially sustainable brand in the world. Deborah's philanthropic projects include the Happy Project by Thalé Blanc, further underscoring her dedication to social impact, and she was honored with the True Altruist Award by the Angelino magazine. Deborah Sawaf has worked with renowned fashion houses such as John Galliano, Valentino, and Roberto Cavalli. She also founded early ventures like Thalia, a fine jewellery collection, and This Age, a couture gone line. Deborah is committed to social impact philanthropist and a focus on mentoring young people, women worldwide, and participates in Women's Economic and Business Conference. She also supports organizations such as Didi Urge Foundation, Qatar America Institute for Culture, and the Burned Children Relief Fund, and serves as a strategy advisor for PoolQuest, a platform for fashion stylists. And in terms of work and accreditations, and I want to highlight that, is design and merchandising from the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, gemology and jewelry design from the Gemological Institute of America, and OCP Power and Influence for Positive Impact from Harvard Business School. And she launched her first entrepreneurial venture, This Age, a couture gone collection in 1993. So the CV goes further, but this is a synthesis, and of course we here with someone that can actually cross over a lot of fantastic differences and empower houses. Okay, Deborah, it's an honor to have you here. I'm very excited and looking forward to talk with you.
Well, thank you, Dinis. I'm honored to be on here with you and your team, and looking at a very positive and impactful future together.
So, Deborah, you have such wealth of diversity and as well of work from Bombay to Los Angeles, as well as your family. You are Indian and British, and of course having Italian influences and US based and married as well with Middle East. So you have a kind of United Nations. So tell us a bit about your personal history, your upbringing, And something in your childhood that made who you are and shaped part of your journey, or some people that you want to highlight?
Well, thank you very much. There are, since I was a child, I think there are so many people that I would like to highlight, which I do one at a time, because it's taken a village to get me to where I am today. I was born in a suburb of Bombay. I was very fortunate to be raised in a multicultural family, because when I look back today, the diversity has been a big power in my life of understanding and, building emotional intelligence to understand different people's approaches. I was very earlier on exposed to fashion, and at a very high level, at a couture level. A family member was already working with Versace, so that was my first exposure to fashion. And that's how I got into the world of fashion.
Oh, fantastic. So, and a bit about your upbringing. I always like to go to the basis. You have a very colorful background in multiple areas. And as well, I know that your relationship with your mother as well shape a lot of the work you're doing, between your creativity, but as well your human centric work. So a bit about that history, because I like to touch that.
I grew up in a multicultural household. My mother's family, we're typically what we call Anglo-Indian, where it's a mix of British and Indian. And, it was the lack of support, the lack of family support. And when two cultures come together that earlier on, it's more acceptable now, but it was so much more difficult in the early days, where you don't have a background where people understand each other, especially across cultures. I believe the work I'm doing today started with my mother's lack of support in her postpartum depression, led to her being treated for mental illness. And it was at some point schizophrenia and then bipolar. And I think I've seen that from a really early age. I was born in India. It's such a beautiful culture and tradition there, mixed with a bit of the West. It's understanding the spirituality of the culture, although I didn't grow up in that. I grew up as Catholic. We were raised Catholic. My parents converted they were married in the Church of England and then moved to Catholicism just because it was more accessible to where we lived. So I was raised Catholic, but I was always immersed and inspired by the Indian culture and traditions, which are so powerful. And even till today, there is an immense amount of respect. There is, the bond that comes from everyone speaking and understanding the same tradition and the same values, which I believe we don't teach in academics anymore, and which is why I developed the program I did. And of course, moving on, I married my husband, who is from Lebanon. And so I always say that our family understands and respects three religions: the Christian, Hindu, and Muslim religion.
That's very special and actually very powerful as well, because the ecumenic part of you changed a lot of things. So from the early days, you touch fashion, creativity, business, and entrepreneurship, and then you shift a lot for education and emotional intelligence. So tell us a bit of your trajectory, especially from your early days in fashion, where you created actually a very premium brand that was used by a lot of stars over there in Hollywood and a lot of different things and achievements, but as well which is quite difficult to manage a premium brand without having big economical groups behind it. So a bit of that trajectory, and now we've been actually building that creativity and that, of course, full of energy, creativity, but as well capacity to put in practice fantastic premium products and a vision.
There is so much. I mean, this is such a big topic, and I will go into that eventually. I think that is a whole topic to be discussed. Exactly what you said, that brands are really supported and fueled by these major organizations that come in and fuel brands that they pick. But then at the end of the day, there are millions of brands out there by incredible designers that never have an opportunity to be seen or heard of and die before they even get to take their second or third step in life. So that is a whole other conversation I'd like to have. But I was really fortunate. Growing up, my father said I immersed into fashion at a very early age. I grew up in a very artistic family. My father was gifted musically, as was my mother, but my mother was also very talented and was an artisan in many ways. And I grew up from the age of 9. I already knew that this was something I loved, but my father had always said to me that fashion was not an intellectual asset for a career. And, I beg to differ with him now, because it has really brought me to where I am today. And I'm sure he's looking down, smiling at me. But the path I took to fashion came post me actually making an attempt to make my parents happy and study psychology, which I ended up doing, but then eventually chose to go the fashion path after I was exposed to the work of Versace being done in India. And I say I got involved in couture because I started my career in fashion with embroidery. I was completely mesmerized by the work that was being done, and decided I wanted to go that route, creating and preserving craftsmanship that is your heritage in so many ways. I went on from there to intern with Valentino again, purely in embroidery. When I created my own line, which was my very first line, it was in apparel, and being influenced by the work of Armani at that point. I was really young, and here's a story that took me down a path to learning and how curiosity can really teach you things. And it is so important for people to be curious. We learn so much on the surface, but we need to go deep and really understand something if we want to know it well. With my first salary, I bought an Armani jacket and actually opened it up, because I lived in India and I didn't have the ability to touch and to understand how the construction was done. And I had done jacket after jacket. I was very into jackets when I was young because of the construction and how it fell. And I opened it up and I wanted to see what was on the inside of the jacket. And I took it to our factory and I said, okay, this is what we need to do. And this is the material we need to find to make it look like that. So that's when I say you learn. I learned from the best. And I was very fortunate to actually grow up in what we call the golden age of fashion. In that period of time, you could actually look at a dress or look at a bag or look at, a woman and say, okay, that's a Valentino, that's a Valentino girl, that's an Yves Saint Laurent bag, or that's an Yves Saint Laurent dress, which is very hard to detect today. Everything looks like everything else. And I think the power that fashion has and the power that designers have is to be unique in your own way, add your own essence to whatever you do. It has to have a touch. I like what I do when people say to me, well, that looks like a Deborah Sawaf. And that's an honor for me. So my path to fashion eventually, when I wanted to move, I moved to the Middle East and then moved to the United States. I decided in 2014, I wanted to create my own brand, and I was really lucky. We're friends with Sean Ferrer, and I felt at some point, Audrey Hepburn has always been an idol and someone I've looked up to, not just for who she is as an idol and as a fashion icon and as an actor, but who she was philanthropically as well, and the impact she made in the late years of her life. What a way to live a full and complete life. And I asked Sean one day, I said, I'd like to, Audrey Hepburn's always been known for her jewelry and her little black dress. I'd like to design a bag inspired by Audrey Hepburn. And I sent him a sketch, and we actually were able to call it the Audrey bag. And that's how we began. That's how we started the brand. Although I did I studied gemology, jewelry design, and I wanted to always get to the next step. So once I started in couture, it wasn't okay for me, I felt, as a person personally, to go into mass production. When I moved to Los Angeles, it was all about, denim and jeans and T-shirts. And I was like, how many crystals can I put on a pair of jeans? It just didn't to me, that wasn't something I wanted to do. And therefore, I went back to school and studied gemology and jewelry design. I wanted to take and learn a little bit more. And I believe could spend my whole life studying and learning new things, especially in the creative world. So that's how I got into fashion, launched Thalé Blanc, which is the name came from my daughter. But Thalé Blanc was fueled by, the inspiration of Audrey Hepburn and the Audrey bag.
So that's a wonderful history, and as well as impressive from Versace to all the work you did. So before you go to all the different achievements, so from that experience from India, and of course India at the time, it was not what it is now, and working with luxury brands, but as well with all this attention to details. And this is something that is very present in your fashion work, but as well in everything you're doing in life. So how did it go from starting this experience to build your own brand and put it together and building, not when you talk about brands, people forget the work that is behind the work of finance and business, but there's as well a huge amount of work on the product, on the details that you put together, and then bringing this to an audience. So tell us a bit about that first experience. How was it? And as well, any histories that you want to share with us?
You want successes and failures?
Oh. I think always the two things are related, and probably the failures teach us how to get successful. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It was a big learning curve for me. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and so I take risks. And you don't think, and for a lot of creative people, we are not thinking about the financial aspect of things. We're not thinking if you can do 100 paintings, if one is appreciated, you feel like it's a big deal, but you've got 99 paintings sitting in the studio. So we don't care about that. We just care about the art being appreciated. But there is so much more. And especially today, fashion touches everything. And I'm talking personally about, the fashion industry that I've been in for 28 years. There is so much to it and so many avenues to it. When people go to fashion college, we're thinking about, okay, you go there as a designer mostly, and you want to be a designer, you want to create a beautiful dress or a beautiful piece of jewelry or leather goods. But there is so much more to fashion than that. And I think, to me, in the beginning, I didn't think about the business aspect of it. And that was a struggle to survive. If you do not understand the basis, or you do not have a team or a partnership that carries the other load, which is the bigger load, you might have the best design, and which is why millions of designers never come to the top. It's just because of not having the rest of the components needed to make a brand successful. And I was lucky. I was incredibly lucky in so many aspects. And my pathway into India through the embroideries that I had done in my pathway into Italy, through the relationships in India, in the world of embroidery and haute couture, is what got me to Italy. And Italy offered a whole different world of, fashion just becomes a canvas to tell your story. And you have the ability, working with artisans and craftsmanship that have been doing this over centuries and now want to make sure that they are the best at their art. And you want to take emotions and put them into your product. But at the same time, you want to have the business side of it taken care of. So that transition for me was a big deal. And Italy was a really big learning curve for my career. And in my career, I had, I had great opportunities when I launched the brand to be in the right space, at the right showroom, having the right factories to work with, having the ability to be as creative as I wanted to be. And your imagination, if you can imagine it, there is a way to build it. So to me, that was a big learning point and a big pivot in my career in fashion. And, India wasn't then what it is today, but the opportunities out of India with our culture and centuries of artisans that is slowly dying. And we need to preserve those arts. And that is the next stage of also what we're doing with the power of words and hopefully Ready Q.
Thank you. So this is very special. And like you said, I think this challenge and this putting together things like these are super important to be able to build any business. So I want to shift to in your career, and I think it would be interesting probably before we go into some of the questions around the challenge of dealing with the emotional parts of building a business and all the challenge that comes out of this, managing teams, managing the challenge, managing the vision, manage the philosophies, the products. All of this implies a huge energy, but as well the capacity to look at different things. So before I go into that, just tell us about the brands and a bit the work you did, and especially Thalé Blanc, the power of words, and the different achievements that you had in your career. And I know that you have as well a quite substantial work in social impact and even in driving rally cars and a lot of other things. So you have a lot of different capacities, Leonardo da Vinci lady.
Hardly, you touch upon, like my father used to say, we're jack of all trades and master of none. And I always wanted to explore and learn everything. So I don't know if that's a positive or negative for where I am today, but it has brought me to where I am. I want to touch upon how I began Thalé Blanc. Of course, it was because I was inspired by this icon, Audrey, by Audrey Hepburn. Don't want to say this icon, but yes, she is the icon for me. And I wanted to create something unique and make that impact. And the Audrey bag till today is the most popular product that we have. But when I first started out of Italy, the embroidery that we were doing in India was for Valentino, and a lot of Valentino product and a lot of the craftsmanship in hardware was done by Paolo Pascini. And I actually approached Paolo Pascini. These are some of the risks I took and said to him, I wanted to work with him to create my line. Paolo only works with major brands. And it was, he had never really worked with somebody who hadn't launched a brand yet. And I showed him some of my designs and had the opportunity to work with him. But that is how I began my career. He could have turned me down, and I really don't know what I would have done next. But some of my art-like pieces come out of Paolo Pascini's factory, and that was something that made me realize, I could actually do and create anything I want with the right support. So that transition was a step up for me. And then I got to work with some of the best factories in Italy that did all kinds of new techniques. And I started to develop new techniques. I started to do things that weren't being done, and learning that people are open to creative and new ideas. It just depends on how much are you willing to give. Like we say with networking, and I'm going off topic a little bit, but when we talk to young kids or graduating entrepreneurs, everybody says you need to go out and network. You need to go out and network. Yes, that's great. You need to network. But what are you bringing to the relationships you make is also important. It's not just about you go out to network to make connection with someone, but what do you have to offer? Always have that ready. And I think that was a big value added to, that was my thinking. That was my part of my upbringing. It's about giving before you think about what you can get from someone. I always think about what can I give to this relationship, because there's no sustainability if it's not a two-way street. So that goes a little bit, goes back again, how I leverage how I was raised to fuel anything that I do in terms of business. That's where the philanthropy comes from as well. as I grow and as I do things, I always want to make sure I'm able to give back. It's been a very important part of my life, and because I believe I am where I am, not because the path has already been laid for me. The opportunities are there. It's whether I'm willing to take it or not, and I've taken those opportunities that were presented, but it's been a gift. And how can I look at that and embrace it, but also think about how can I make a difference through these opportunities that I have? And that's always gone side by side with me, or hand in hand with everything I've done. There's always been a philanthropic approach to it. And when I raised kids in the West, I wanted my kids to understand that there is a whole other world out there. It's great to be privileged, but privilege comes with responsibility. So it's kind of the DNA for our brand, our family values as well.
It's very special. So I want to just touch, so you mentioned that how difficult it is to work with these haute couture fashion houses, and as well, in the case of Valentino, is probably an icon. And you mentioned, of course, Andrea Byrne. So that has, I think, for me, influenced me as well in my dreams of building things, because you have always a technology icon, film icon, fashion icon, a music icon, and these things change. I know that this is being quite important because you are as well an icon right now of fashion and creativity. So I think working with these people, and I want to go to the human side and the business side. So there's a craftsmanship in fashion, there's a human part, and then there's the business side. So how do you start juggling these three things, and probably passing here a bit to your work that was afterwards to create the Power of Words, and even Thalé Blanc, Power of Words comes under the brand Thalé Blanc, and creating things that make a kind of relationship between fashion, creativity, and then you enter into all this part of emotional intelligence and relationships and people.
Well, Thalé Blanc was already about the transition from Thalé Blanc to the Power of Words happened over COVID, and that was totally coincidental. Working out of Italy, I live in LA, but I pretty much I was every 6 weeks on a flight to Italy for work. So I really had no bases in the United States. Our brand is very recognized in Europe, in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe was a very big part of our business in the good days. Going from fashion to from Thalé Blanc to the Power of Words. Thalé Blanc had been around for about a decade and a half when I had the opportunity to be the fashion event at the NBA All-Star Weekend and at the Super Bowl weekend that was happening both in Cleveland and in LA. And the request was to give back to sport, give back to mental health in sport. And I realized at that point, mental health had been a very personal topic for me. I also realized that it was post-COVID. I was already mentoring about 17 students at that point. And the struggle that these kids had leaving universities when the universities closed and going back home, the struggle that these kids had to manage their mental well-being about where their careers were going next, graduating entrepreneurs. As an entrepreneur, you wait to get out into the world and take your project out into the world, and they were not going to have that opportunity because COVID had there was no direction and no one had any idea where COVID was going. And so I realized I was going to leverage the voice of fashion to be able to do something impactful in the world of mental health. I had an idea, but I didn't know how far it was going to go and how successful it was going to be. And therefore, I decided I was going to create a fashion brand that would speak about emotional intelligence and through words, through powerful words. And I think the first best decision I made was really to pivot completely rather than bring another project onto Thalé Blanc. I think as a business decision, I decided this was going to be a philanthropic brand. The Power of Words was going to teach, was going to give back, was going to leverage the voice of fashion, art, music, everything that congregated people to spread positivity. In 2020, 22, I was asked to be the fashion event at the NBA All-Star Weekend. And that was just coincidental. I happened to be in Cleveland and with my friends, and sometimes destiny finds you. And I think that was a moment where destiny found me and where I pivoted my career and give back to mental health in sport. And that's when I realized, flying back from Cleveland, I realized, fashion needed more than a one-time, or mental health needed more than a one-time give back. What was I going to be able to do to really make this impact? I realized that fashion is a very powerful platform. We touch everything. If you think about fashion, we touch almost every material on this planet. And like I talked about the diversity in fashion, I mean, as a designer, there is so much you can do, but we also, a little kid in the street understands fashion, a CEO of a company understands fashion, president understands fashion. Everybody cares about how they look. It's an emotional connection. What you wear reflects how you feel. You pick a certain color and wear a certain color, and it impacts how you feel. So you wear it for you first before you're actually wearing it for others. And there is an emotional connection there. And I realized that using that, I could actually do something more powerful than just wear and make beautiful clothes. I could give it meaning and purpose. I could have it talk to people. But also, this was a way for me to draw people towards what we were doing in a beautiful way. When you bring people into a comfortable space, they share things and they open up and they speak. And I realized this was such a great opportunity. And how was I going to do this? I had already had a really great network. I'm surrounded by what I call my posse, the most influential women in my life. And, the power of their words. So I came back home from Cleveland and realized I was going to launch a new brand. I think my husband thought I was having a mental health moment. When I said to him, I'm going to launch a new brand post-COVID, I closed my store in Beverly Hills. We went online. The factories were struggling. But I realized this was a moment in time. And sometimes when you believe in something, it doesn't always work. For me, it did. And the timing was right. And I decided to create the power of words and leveraging the voice of role models, considering I already worked with role models in fashion, leveraging the voice of role models for change. And who isn't willing to use their voice to impact someone else and impact their communities? And that's how the power of words came to be. And I think the first best thing we did was the name of the brand being the power of words. And that's how we launched that. Started with fashion, of course, but while I launched the fashion brand, I used the power of those words to start building a program on emotional intelligence, which is a model I was using anyway in my life, my survival to maintain my mental health, and also using it for the students that I worked with.
So you touched something very special. So you launched it post-COVID, during all the mental health issues that were, I think, more highlighted. And we're taking a lot of different things here. So I want to touch this part of mental health and well-being, and which is something very dear for me. And it's very sensitive because, of course, there's a huge prejudice and a huge amount of issues around mental health. Even if you just say mental health or mental illness, people are afraid of talking about that. There's a huge stigma around that and a huge fear. But then if you bring this to fashion, of course, it becomes even more powerful. And that, of course, during COVID, there was all these things multiplied by a lot of factors. And like you mentioned, these affect massive, most of the retail industry worldwide, fashion, tourism, a lot of other things, hospitality. So I want to just, so the question right now is more, I would like to touch. So how do you deal with these topics that are so sensitive? And I know that you've been doing a huge amount of research. You become an expert in these topics, and you've been writing about it, doing conferences around the world. But from this personal experience of yours of building brands that reflect this, and as well having all the ups and downs of building a fashion and haute couture business, to the fact of end up actually becoming an expert and a coach in the areas of emotional well-being and emotional intelligence. So EQ stands for emotional quotients, and IQ is intelligent coefficient. So I want to touch the inception of this, and then we can dive in on this concept.
Something that we say is IQ without EQ leaves you unbalanced. Great leaders have high IQ, but they also have a very high EQ. And that is an essential component, because we don't work solo, we work with people, we work in teams, and we want to keep that human connection. To be able to keep that human connection, you need to have emotional intelligence at its peak to make sure it's successful. So, that was my reason for going down that path. Emotional intelligence is something that all of us believe. When I started doing this, I believed I have high emotional intelligence, and really from building the program, realized that emotional intelligence is something you have to be reminded of on a daily basis. You can have your manifestation in the morning and your meditation in the morning, but life gets so hectic, you forget about those basic human values when you go out into a hectic world. How do you manage your stress? And this is something that everybody needs. And everything that we have been doing in mental health has been one-on-one forever. When you start talking about mental health, yes, and let's go back to it being a taboo. It is still a taboo. As much work as we're doing in the United States, which seems most advanced, we in the United States, you still have people say that, and you still have professionals say that we're all struggling with the mental health crisis. Life is too fast-paced now. Post-COVID, it really surfaced. It brought all of these struggles that people were able to put under the rug, as we say. It brought it to the surface. And now we're dealing with that. Now people, with the immersion of technology, and with technology coming into the world so quickly, everything you do, Dinis, in AI, there are a lot of people that are not ready to embrace it as openly as they should. And that becomes a mental health issue. Not being able to cope with your illness, that becomes a mental health issue. So there are very small things that can take you off balance with your well-being and then get into a mental health issue. So it's being able to manage your well-being on a daily basis that's going to prevent you from sliding down into depression, into this deep dark hole, into insecurities. We talk about positivity. Everything that we do in emotional intelligence is we take all of the negative emotions that you have and we give you one of 7 positive tools. When we talk about it through fashion, it's positively. When we talk about it through art, it's positivity. Music, sport, it's all about putting the positivity out there, and it's real positivity because it is focus. It gives you a goal. It gives you something to work towards, something to look at and say, yes, I'm heading in that direction. But if you don't have direction and you don't have focus, that's when you get lost.
So you touch a lot of very sensitive areas. And of course, this is beautiful to speak, but act on it is extremely difficult.
Awesome.
So I know that you developed the concept of the bands that you touch here. So I would like, and we'll put images as we speak, for people to see, at least once to see it in video. So I create the 7 bands, and each band has a beautiful iconography, a series of actually even fashion that you create in different areas. And each of them symbolizes an emotion, and you create a framework. And this framework, actually, I've been thinking since, of course, I met you, I've been thinking more and more about this framework because it's very special and not easy because, of course, like you said, if you are in technology, if you are in business, you have to be tough. You have to compete, you have to find solutions, you have to get things on time, and you have different personalities, different creative methods, different methodologies, different project management. So this creates, in some cases, very competitive and toxic elements. But at the same time, of course, is the way we manage these emotions, the way we take this, because of course there's the stress of business, there's the failure if you don't achieve the KPIs of the business, or sometimes you fail completely with the business. So how do you juggle all these different challenges? And if you can as well highlight the bundles, and as well the framework you created around the emotional, the animals, and different parts that you put together, which is a wonderful storytelling, but really helps people.
When I decided I was going to go down this path, I had already, being in fashion, and like I said, fashion touches so many different industries, and technology is a very big part of it. When I think and when I develop something, even when it's a product in a fashion brand, I think about what is this going to be or look like in 5 years, and how is it going to evolve and still live in 10 years' time. So with the power of words, there needed to be a lot more focus than that. And I realized that with the power of words and what I wanted to do in mental health and emotional intelligence, although we talk about mental well-being, not mental health, 5 or 6 pillars that we have, which is technology, education, fashion, film, art, and doing this through music and sport, doing everything we did in areas where people congregate, where people come together, where people don't think about their problems, but they're really celebrating and enjoying music and sport. And those are the best places to communicate emotions, where people are not thinking about the struggles you have, the politics, the religion, the culture. You're all one because your goal and your focus is the one thing, the music or the sport. My idea was really to leverage those areas where people congregate to express the real emotions that you feel, not just the emotion for the sport, but as an individual, how can you share and have eye contact in a very neutral space? So everything we've done, like I mentioned earlier, in mental health is one-on-one. You work with your counselor, you work with your therapist, you go to conferences, you go to talks, you be inspired, and you walk away, you meditate, and then you walk away, and you get into a very hectic life. How do we manage that, and how do we balance that? That is the basis of the Band Bond initiative. I wanted to take it outside of the one-on-one therapy that we were having with people and actually be able to communicate with each other. I needed it to be simple, and because of the different parts of the world I've lived in, different cultures I'm involved in, I'm always thinking about how is this culture going to adapt to it? How is a religion going to look at it? And the very simple and most impactful aspect of this is the emotions that every human being feels. That is derived from the ancient philosophy of the chakras. And this has also been scientifically proven that, and we have research that backs it, that our bodies hold emotion. When you feel a certain emotion, you feel it in a certain part of your body. So I took the 7 chakras of the Indian philosophy, or the ancient Indian philosophy used in meditation and in yoga, and applied it to be tangible. So taking all of those 7 emotions and adapting the color that represents that emotion to the word. And when I talk about these 7 emotions, they're actually 7 tools. They're parts of the body where you hold certain emotions, taking that word and putting it, adapting a color to it, and then that becomes the tool. Now, once we had these and had the idea for that, it went into how does this become something that I can look at somebody without having to speak to them, communicate how I'm feeling. So we put it into bands, and 7 colors, 7 words. 7 is a magical number. It appears in every culture, every religion, 7 days of the week, 7 colors of the rainbow. That was the most easy way to communicate what we were doing, in addition to the fact that these actually connect to emotions in the body. Now, the human brain has, or the human being has, about 27, 29 emotions. How do we take those emotions and give you one tool out of the 7 that you feel to be able to work with it? And that is what our program is about. I think what is the most powerful aspect of the program is that through the bands and through wearing a band, we talk about it as one day at a time. Through wearing the band, you're being aware of what you want to accomplish. You're being aware of the emotion you're feeling. So you have the courage to wear the band, to express the emotion. But what that also helps you do is focus on what you need to accomplish. When I'm wearing a band, I'm thinking about, what does my day have in store for me? I have a meeting to go to. I want to make sure I eat healthy today. I need to go to the gym. I can pick a band for each one of those tasks that I have to complete. But having this on my hand is also a reflection of the fact that I need to accomplish this, and that's my focus. I can have a reminder on my phone, but this is more visual for people looking at me. And we say practice this in community, because when it is practiced in community, you are able to express to someone else in an unspoken way, in a visual form, that this is how I'm feeling. And you understand the emotions they're going through by the bands they're wearing. So it seems so simple, but there's depth and impact to it. Impact for you, but impact also impacts the people around you. It's how do the people communicate with you without words, and understand, and are able to reach out and help if that's needed. So it's, we are not just emotional intelligence for yourself, but it's an emotional intelligence program that connects communities. And the way we've started to do this, we started with universities, a couple of schools in the States, in the United States. I presented this, of course, after we were nominated in Italy. So I realized Europe was open to it. Then I had the opportunity to go with the largest equality platform in the world to the G20, and had an opportunity to present it in India, where this originated from. And I found that they were ready to embrace it. And mental health is a very taboo topic in some parts of the world, and India is one of them. But giving them an opportunity to express it in a positive way was a different approach, teaching them that it is okay to be able to speak about something. And sometimes when you don't want to speak about something, there's a visual tool for you to be able to express it. So this is how I realized that different cultures were ready to embrace what we were doing. Bringing the art and music and fashion into it really brings people into your space of comfort, where we say that it's unintimidating, it's uninvasive, it's a space where you can express yourself through different mediums. And art is really rehabilitative, and we have the studies that show how art is needed for rehabilitation, but it is also a great medium to express yourself. There are, so many different verticals to what we do, whether you talk about, transitioning from, the bands for adults. When I'm trying to go back to your question about where the animals come in. When I decided I was going to do this for the youth, the youngest ambassador we have is 8. And when I realized she can understand how to express her emotions through the Band Bond initiative, we could go younger. Today, parents are putting an iPad or a phone in the hands of kids in many ways to teach them through technology, educate them, whether it's teaching them the alphabet or colors or through stories. But technology is a big vehicle to also communicate. How do you explain this to a child? And I realized the one way studies show that kids relate to stories told by animals. How could I find the animals? And we started to explore that opportunity, finding animals that represent the emotions. And that's where the animals come into the program. How does the elephant show empathy? How does the penguin show resilience? Bringing those animals into the teaching of emotional intelligence became this really powerful tool for children. So we have toys. We have a project with the toys where the toys tell a story. Each of the 7 animals come with a story. The storytelling then can go into animation and gamification. And through the gamification, you can actually quantify the level of empathy in a child and the level of resilience, warriorism, through the choices they make in the gamification. Now, this is the future of what we want to do. It is conceptual, and we're working on developing that further. And those animals then became a collaboration in art. And how does an artist take our word or take our animal and express it through art? And what we add is purpose and meaning to the work of an artist. And it can be any artist. It can be a ceramic artist, a stained glass artist, or just a digital artist. But art is a powerful medium of communication. And that is how we collaborated with Ramiro Alban. I loved his work. I was introduced to him by a dear friend when we were doing a conference. And we've given a CSR component to art now, where the elephant tells a story. When you look at the elephant, and it has an AR component to it, the augmented reality actually tells you a 3D visual story of what does the elephant represent. And if the elephant represents empathy, what does empathy mean? So it's a constant reminder to everything you see and touch and work with in life. We can bring emotional intelligence into absolutely everything we do.
Well, this is incredible. I would say one of the most inspiring things we can have in our world. And we need to integrate these more and more into lifestyle, like you mentioned, but as well into technology, because of course we have a huge disruption. And in this own channel, I've been interviewing people from NVIDIA and some of the top companies in the world. Normally there's a big divorce between the engineering part and bringing this to technology. So I know that at the moment you are involved in a legal disclaimer. I'm involved as well with building something that is Red EQ. And I would like to touch that because one of the reasons I got involved is because I believe this is more important than ever. And to be honest, there's a lot of scientific studies that we are already in a stage, and this is public information, but I just want to highlight for people listening to us because I like to provoke my audience in a good way. But for instance, at the moment, we are in a stage where AI can invent AI, and this is coming, and we have to buckle up. This actually is a fantastic AI that can invent AI is coming. Buckle up. This is an article on the Forbes magazine, on the Forbes website, that highlights this. So we've been going through a human progress through time, and now we are in a stage that we go with machines, digital sentience. But this sentience and these machines, whatever we take it serious or not, are as well part of us, a part of our creation. So I know that you're not a technologist, but I want to touch in your business in emotional research. And you mentioned that you work a lot with companies. So first of all, probably if you can explain why Red EQ, and as well, what is EQ? Because there's emotional intelligence and emotional quotients. So I want to touch this. And then second, how we see this, especially in the corporate world, in the technology world, because I know that you have a specific vision for this, and as well a lot of potential that this has, because we all need this in one way or the other.
Let's talk about Red EQ. So we talk about emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence as a word is being used over and over again. And I have to say, and I want to give credit to, like I talked about my posse before, and I'm going to talk about it again. You know, we meet once in a way, and we're women that brainstorm, a small group of women that brainstorm. And one of the ideas that came up is, you know, let's give, because we talk about the work we're doing. And my dearest friend said to me, you know, let's give it a new name. And it was her idea and her recommendation. Relational emotional development, it really talks about what the power of words does. And that is what RED is. It's relational emotional development. We survive our mental well-being with our community, or with the help of our community. That is where the relation comes in. And that was another, you know, the power of words was the first name for the brand. But then Red EQ is really what the power of words does, is it builds that relation between people and helps you develop your emotions. So that is where the name Red EQ came from. So it's relational emotional development that teaches emotional intelligence. And we are, that this is primarily for people to learn, for people to be inspired by, and also has the creative component to it. The collaboration, Dinesh, with with you and you coming on board with us just elevated that to new heights. It took it to a new level, integrating technology, cutting edge technology in AI to what we do, which is so needed right now. And I let you talk about the platform itself, but it's using artificial intelligence with emotional intelligence as an ally, where it's something that walks alongside you. It doesn't overpower you. And that is the balance. That is our vision, to maintain that balance between human and technology and fostering genuine human interaction, even while we use technology. It blends creativity and technology. And, you have your vision for where this is going. And I'm really inspired by that. And the creativity that comes from AI, I'd love you to share a little bit about what your vision is and how we can collaborate on this and how we are collaborating on this.
Yeah, I think this is where probably the communication, I think this will be for part 2 today is about you, but definitely I think for people listening to us, I think and I want to touch this is more where our interactivity will start, and we'll do a channel, a podcast just for this. But like you just touched, all of us spend 5 to 10 hours in front of devices like this with our business, with different things. And at the moment, this technology that we created is being part of who we are, and is starting to evolve. It's like another evolutionary part of humanity, and this humanity it's us. So I think the challenge and the opportunity is how we integrate this part of humanity. I was reading an article today, and it was in Time magazine, and it was saying that what makes us humans is our capacity for kindness, our capacity to engage with other people. And it's very beautiful talk in theory, but humanity is going through a lot of challenges. You are in the US, but there's a lot of division, and we have still a lot of issues with very basic stuff like war, wealth, poverty, and things like that. But at the same time, we have a lot of amazing things. So I think on the Ready Q part that I'm excited to work with you, and there will be our interaction, is how we can bring this work that you create, the framework of the emotional intelligence, to technology and to AI, and integrate it in a proper way that the AI can actually have at least this component of learning and emotional intelligence. But it's not just purely from a large language model, but it's purely from an interactivity between us. And that's what I love about you, because you remind me of my humanity, and remind me as well of this importance. So I know that we passed 1 hour, and this is the first of a couple of episodes we're going to do. So I want to come back to the definition of emotional intelligence. And I know that you're dealing with the in some cases, I think you are a wonderful and generous soul. You have like big cases, like you mentioned, in mental health. There's the big cases on education, and big cases in corporations, and how corporations can use this methodology that you created. So on these 3 examples, of course, the more extreme mental illness, the second one is about education, which is critical, and the third one is about corporation. And the fourth one then is where I will come with you, that is about the AI, and how we bring this not just to the tools, but integrate this on the AI models of thinking. Okay, but on the 3 models that you are working and you have experience, what did you learn that you would like to share with us? Because I think that's, for me, probably the most important that I would like to take for people listening to us, and I really take this serious, meditate and think about this. But I'll pass the word to you. I would like to hear your case studies, and as well your power of words on this.
One thing I want to say is when we talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about awareness and focus and being empathetic. And this is what the basic, these are the principles of emotional intelligence. What we add through the power of words to that is the unspoken communication, the visual communication, the connection. So we add 3 extra steps to that. We add wearing the band helps you focus every minute of the day, and get through and accomplish what you need to accomplish. It's first being aware, and therefore you put on the band. The second step is you have this constant reminder on your hand. And the third step is you are telling somebody else how you feel, even when you're not ready to speak about it, but you want to express yourself, but you don't have the words to say it or don't have the time to actually communicate it. What's amazing is the people around you, which is step number 4, is people around you recognize your emotion. And this is where you can interact with complete strangers. Whereas if we just think about us being emotionally intelligent, the pressure is all on us to be emotionally intelligent with other people. But how do other people know where we are in our emotional intelligence space? So they don't know what we're feeling, they assume. So this is really taking away that assumption of people's feelings and say, this is how I'm feeling and this is where I need help today, because we as human beings have so much pride to actually ask for help. And the program actually gives you the opportunity to ask for help, to say, I need compassion and I need empathy. I'm struggling with being resilient. I really want to eat healthy and I need help with that. And, people around you just make healthier choices for food and help you with something as simple as that, or help you with not being tempted to have another drink or take another pill or do something you really don't want to do, not lose your temper for some people, not get upset about little things. So there are so many, and this is why the program is so beautiful. And the more we develop it and the further we develop it for different professions, it's even more enlightening. And it's a completely new approach to how you deal with emotions. A simple thing I talk about in corporations, when you practice the band-bond therapy, the CEO walks into the office or walks into the building, for example, for a large organization like Facebook or Amazon, walks into the elevator, looks at the lift man and says, how can I help you with being optimistic today? Or how can I help you with being resilient today? The communication you have is on a different level, not just superficial and maybe for a lot of people, it's not superficial, but it's, hi, how are you? How's your day? You have a much deeper connection with someone and you make them feel like you care about them as an individual, not that just their productivity. And this is where it shows how making someone feel part of a community, someone feel like you care, can actually increase productivity. And that is what we have studies on to show that builds teamwork, that builds great leaders, that gives people the opportunity to take leadership roles in organizations, and which is why it's so important. And the most beautiful thing I believe about the program is that if a parent that works in an organization practices the program, it trickles down outside of his workplace. It trickles down to him taking what he's practicing every day at work to his family, to his social circles, to his people that he does sport with. So it trickles into different areas of your life. And in addition to that, if the kids practice it, it starts to trickle down to how they react to their teachers, how they react with their friends, how they react with their parents. So there is such a web, I like to call it a web, of this exchange of emotions that are happening, and they're all positive. And that is the power, I believe, of the power of words and the Band-Bond Initiative. Now, the technology adds another layer to that. This is so effective with suicide prevention. This is so effective with PTSD, with substance abuse. This gives people an opportunity to say, I'm struggling and I need help, without having to verbally communicate it. That is powerful. That is needed. If there is another way to communicate without speaking, let's talk about it, because we need to do this, and we need to do it now. Life is moving too fast. And I know from a technological aspect, you could say that in the next 3 years, life is going to change for everybody, especially for the young generation. How are we going to give them that balance or maintain that basic human skill of communication to help support you, to help? It is your community that is going to be able to keep you together, to hold you, to lift you. These are the things we're really not focusing on, because we're running at 300 miles an hour every day, trying to accomplish things and trying to prove ourselves.
So as a last question, and for this part one, because definitely I want to touch these topics with more accessibility. So from your experience, and you just mentioned very serious areas of the fragilities of humanity, from suicide to children with a lot of challenge, people on unbalance in work, stress levels that are quite huge for, I think, most of the people that have a corporate life. So, and of course, there's the technology challenges and the challenge of dealing with technology, which is going to be, or is already part of all our daily lives. So my last question is, from your learning, and as well, I know that you are a very balanced person. How do you balance all these things, applying this to you, and what you suggest for people listening to us? And I'm sure they will want to engage on your social media and different parts to try to learn.
Well, practice leads to prevention. So I believe that it's one day at a time, which is what we teach. And pick your emotions for the day. Pick the tools you need to guide your emotions for the day. I have so many people, if you go onto our podcast, which I like to say is my weakest link. I'm not best at that. But it was important for me to put those voices of people out there that have actually struggled and how they see that this could be, or this is the tool to help them prevent getting to that next step. For me personally, I have to practice every day, and it has become part of my life. I leave the bands where I brush my teeth and pick the tools that I need. I want to be optimistic that my interview with Dinis is going to go well. I want to be resilient to complete the project I need to do today. I want to be resilient to also get to the gym. There are so many things that I need to do, but I need that reminder, and it's on my hand. And at night, when I look at it, if I still haven't been to the gym, I am going to get up and go, walk 5,000 steps or 10,000 steps, whatever it is I can get in. It's that focus that helps you balance. But through that, I'm also communicating my emotions with those around me. So that has become a part of my life. And where I see this going is eventually people will look at a color and feel the emotion. And that is the stage we need to get to. Or to look at a total stranger and give them a thumbs up and say, congratulations for being optimistic. Because the colors, the words are unanimous to every human being on the planet, to every culture, every religion. It is the easiest way. It has to be anything we want to do to make change has to be simple to implement. And that is what's powerful about the Band Bond initiative. It is the most simple project to implement and to get people engaged. But people are always apprehensive about getting engaged with something new. Let's make it fun. There are so many ways that we can bring them into our world to manage their mental well-being. So what they walk away with are tools. They don't just walk away being inspired. They walk away with the tools to practice and manage their emotional well-being.
Well, fantastic advice. I have to practice much more myself. And thank you, Deborah, for your inspiration. And then really talk with my heart, because this is an area where I've been kind of probably a volcano of emotions. Probably it's another 8 element that you have to do how you deal with volcanoes. But I think that this practice and the day-to-day approach towards how you choose, and I like the very practical element how you put this thing, because I overcomplicate, but you forget to leave it. And probably that's my learning from you today. So I want to thank you for this fantastic time. I'm still measuring a couple of words and thinking about others. And what I would like for people listening to us is really this power of words, this emotional intelligence, the red EQ, which is very about the red, the color of emotions, and EQ, emotional quotient, is more important than ever. And definitely you're going to hear much more from Deborah here. This is the first take, and you're going to have a lot of fun. But as well, I would like to welcome my audience to celebrate whatever you do in this moment. Have a pause, think about it, and meditate. Deborah has a couple of videos about that. And think about how you can actually improve this practice on each day and remind this. Thank you, Deborah. It's been an honor having you here, and we'll put all the links for you, images for people listening and seeing our fashion achievements and the different parts, the links to our websites and social media presence. And definitely you're going to hear much more about her in this channel, in this series.